Vasudevendra Yogindram Natva Jnana Pradam Gurum Mumukshunam Hitarthaya Tattva Bodho Bhidiyate. So these two words, Nitya, Anitya, right, Viveka. Now we started out with these very important, this is the essence of the whole teaching. That's why they're so important, Nitya, Anitya. So this means this Nitya, see, because it's eternal, okay, there's a lot more to this word eternity. In fact, the whole teaching is understanding what is eternal. Okay, so it's the whole book is really about these two distinctions of Nitya and Anitya. See, if something, right, disappears, suppose we say that the eternal got covered, right? I forgot, I lost touch with the eternal. Right. So what does this mean if you think about it? I lost contact with the eternal. Eternal for a while was no longer available to me. Suppose you say that. So what does this mean? So on one hand, we're saying that the eternal obtains all of the time. And on the other hand, the fella says, I lost touch with the eternal. That means that the eternal is no longer here. I was in touch with the eternal for a moment, for a while, and now something happened. Maybe the children spilled some milk or some domestic affairs, and I lost it. I lost the eternal, okay? So now what does this mean if you think about it? It means that this is illogical, because eternal by definition has to be available all the time. It has to be true for everyone, no matter whether you're a baby, a child, a teen, or an adult. It even has to be true when the body physically dies. Okay? So even when this body dies, Nityam still has to be known all the time. Think about that. So this means now, if someone dies, right, the physical body literally passes away, and for that person, Nityam is no longer true, what does that mean? It's illogical. So this means whatever they were in touch with was not Nityam, it was Anityam, it was a concept. So this means that even after physical death, Nityam is still known. To whom? To you. You understand? So this means that even after death, Nityam is still true. Even while alive, Nityam is still true. This means that which is eternal cannot ever be covered. In fact, we can prove this. Suppose you ask me a question now, well, what about those folks who are, sort of extremely into, the chavarkas, they're just into sense gratification. What about them? They don't care about this. They don't pursue religion. They don't pursue any of this stuff. What about them? Well, what are they looking for? Why are they pursuing sense gratification? To get what? Happiness. As we will soon see, happiness, literally love and happiness, are expressions of Nityam. So if you were to ask, how does this Nityam manifest at the level of emotions? How does this Nityam manifest in reference to what we pursue in the world? The answer is looking for happiness and love. Now, is there anyone who's not looking for these two things, happiness and love? Even those who are, in a terrible situation, right? The life seems to be going downhill, seemingly. They're still looking for what? They're still looking for some moments of relief, some moments of happiness, some moments of love. Love and happiness are therefore expressions of Nityam. And since everyone is looking for these two, it means what? That everyone is already in touch with Nityam. Everyone already has some understanding of Nityam. The only issue is, of course, is one doesn't quite understand what is this Nityam. So what happens is we end up mixing or mistaking happiness and love for what? Nityam. So then we say what? I want to be eternally in love. I want to be eternally happy. Or happiness comes, and then we say, this is who I am. I am this happiness. No, because happiness, again, was an expression of something that happened as a result of an action. And we said anything induced by an action because that action was in time, therefore any result that came out of that action, by definition, has to be also what? Limited and in time. And anything in time is anitya. Okay? So what does this mean? It means that if nityam, that which is eternal, was covered, if it was not available, then that means nobody would be looking for the truth. Everyone starts to look for the truth eventually. Everyone starts to ask questions about life. You know, how can I live a better life? How can I have a better time here? All of these questions arise out of what? They're all expressions looking for nityam, something that lasts, permanent contentment. If you ask a fella, would you prefer rather temporary moments of happiness, or would you have a constant, eternal place of happiness? Who's going to choose moments of happiness? We all want permanent. But because we don't know how to go about discovering that which is permanent, nityam, that which is eternal, what's the only fallback? What's the only fallback? The fallback is to what the entire world knows very well, which is what? Anityam. Therefore, anityam becomes the dominant way how life is conducted. It is conducted by seeking, it is conducted by looking, it is conducted by philosophy, it is conducted by religion, it is conducted by experiences, it is pursued through spiritual experiences, it is pursued through all sorts of pursuits, all sorts of efforts in the hopes to what? Extend that short moment into something that lasts, that doesn't wane, that doesn't waver. Therefore, through our own experience, we can tell, we can prove that this nityam is through and through all things. Everyone already understands it. Otherwise, there will be no such thing as the truth. If I say to you, hey, you know, what is the truth? You'll be saying, what are you talking about? This is all there is to the world. There is no truth. But this question eventually starts in every single person's mind, whether we're talking in those fellas in whatever country, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 5,000 years from now, the question is always going to be there, which is what? What is the truth, right? How do I discover the truth? And therefore, by asking that question, we demonstrate that the truth, by definition, nitya, is never, ever covered. Okay, so therefore, now the book is going to investigate what is this nityam and what is my relationship to this nityam. This is to be discovered. Atma vit shokam tarati, in other words, the one who knows the nature of self crosses over sorrow. And what is this? And what causes sorrow? What causes sorrow? Constant pursuit for extending that moments of love and joy. Because it was so happy, it was such a lovely moment, it felt so good. Now it's gone, I know, Bao, now it's gone, and therefore I miss it, so I want another pursuit of that. And therefore, this pursuit after pursuit is going to bring the person some form of dissatisfaction, some form of disappointment. And therefore, this nityam, which is, as we will see, the nature of Atma, the nature of you, happens to be this very eternal principle. By discovering this, your true nature, what happens? Atma, shokam tarati, crosses over sorrow. How does it cross over sorrow? Is it a physical crossing over? Is it a crossing over into some other world? No. Why not? Why not? Think about it logically. Why not? If this is crossing somewhere else, what's the logical fallacy of this, Lorena?
In a way, burning the curtain of death.
Say again?
Burning the curtain of death. That is the only physical way of crossing over. But the challenge is how to realize the truth without opening the curtain of death.
Okay. Lorena, yep.
Because it's not an action. It's not an action. It's not crossing over. It's not an action. It's an understanding through knowledge.
Okay.
Because the other world is also temporary.
Yeah, okay, go on. Any other reasons why?
It's all within that truth.
Okay, go on. More reasons?
It would imply that the Atma is not here and now.
Okay, good, good. These are all 100% good reasons. Anything else that comes to your mind? There's actually, they're all true. I'm just, just sharing more reasons. Okay. Okay, so happiness, right? So this discovery of truth is crossing over. If that was the case, is that new place here now? No. So just to cross over means what? That new crossing has now a beginning. Again, we go back to the same problem, anityam. And this anityam is what every one of us has now said, whether it's death, whether it's an action, because action always begins in time. That is the nature of action. Therefore, all reasons, all pursuits to discover, to come in contact with the truth fail, because the pursuit is other than the real pursuit, which is what? Discovery. And this is how we go about this, for the most part, we apply an action. We apply, as we discussed, we want to kind of uplift our Kundalini. We want to discover this Kriya Yoga, right? And then you want to sort of move your energy up and down the spine. You want to, have sound healing. You want to, someone to touch you on the third eye to kind of give you Shaktipat. So all of these, what do they all have in common? They are all what? Actions. They're all actions that come in time. Therefore, by the nature of any action, being limited, it can only give you so much result, only so much karma palam. Okay. Therefore, it's not going to solve the problem. So therefore, this is why we say Atma Vit, the knower of Atma, Shokam Tarati, the one who knows Atma, the one who discovers Atma, crosses over sorrow, crosses over this need for looking for more things, for something better. Okay, anything on your mind you want to say? Okay. So now, and then we said last week, so having now used at least this initial form of discriminative inquiry, we're not saying at this stage the person has to sort of know, what's nityam and so on, but, it starts because you sort of see, people looking for the truth, and then you start to ask these basic questions. And then when we start to use this basic form of human intellect, which is fantastic at discerning and looking at the truth, at looking at why, we ask why are you doing this? Why, how did God create this world, and where was he before the universe? All of these are human intellect. This is a wonderful human intellect that just never stops asking. This is the glory of having a human intellect. And so the same intellect now starts to recognize the true value, not that it didn't discover this before, but it starts to really question what is the real purpose of pursuit of more anityams. And that's when what happens, viraga comes, viraga. And as we said, viraga, if raga is extremely strong longing for something, right, which is nothing wrong, by the way. Someone asked me a question. They said, Andre, what's the right attitude towards fancies? What's the right attitude towards looking for delights in life? Should I feel guilty? Because I innocently go through the world and I just experience delights in the world. Is there something wrong with that? And how would you answer this? Right. So they were asking, what is the right attitude towards pleasures and delights that come in our life?
As long as they're not binding. Like they're controlling you.
Yeah. So when Nagesh says binding, it just means they are so they take one for a ride, right? So they're so sort of captured in the individual that they're unable to think about anything else now. It sort of carries a trail. So something gets experienced, and even after it's over, it still lasts all day, right? So this means your whole day has now been taken over by something that was perhaps overpowering or wasn't, sort of healthy. So now the question is, how do you know whether a delight or a sensation or any kind of delight that comes in your life, how do you know whether it's healthy or not? How do you know what's the yardstick? What's the measuring stick? And the answer is, again, if after it has gone, right, and it still stays in your mind, then we have something to work with. If you're able just to let it go, right, enjoy it while it lasts, but once it's over, you just move on, right, because life, has more attention, it needs your attention, then it's by definition decently healthy. So now with this simple attitude, one doesn't have to worry about denial, putting things kind of under the carpet and saying, I should feel guilty. And all of these psychological pressures, they do come. So no, this is unnecessary, because look at it this way. Suppose you deny yourself the lights of life in the name of spirituality. What would that do? What is that going to do? Oh, problems, right? Psychological problems. Is this going to convert into some sadistic imaginations, some imaginative pleasures? It's just not a good way to go, because it sort of builds that pressure inside, and it converts into something that is sadistic, something that is impure. And this is all a product of kind of having this wrong attitude or denying oneself the lights of life. Okay, so this means that when it says longing, like absence of longing, it doesn't mean denial. It doesn't mean pretending to be dispassionate because I'm just so above this world. It just means that you are using this viveka. In the presence of this viveka, you see what things their real purpose has to play, and then you have a relationship with it as long as is needed. But you're still able to sort of distance yourself, right? You're still able to sort of do your own thing. Okay, so releasing this longing for phala bhoga, for enjoyments, or for looking, like constantly seeking for objects, artha phala, objects of enjoyment, where iha and amutra. So iha in this world, and amutra thereafter, which is after death. In other words, heaven and so on. Okay, so just letting this thing go because of this viveka, which is now coming into the individual's life. Okay, is this clear so far?
Hey, André. Jai here.
Jai, hi.
Help is our mind also if we try to see in all our actions, in all the world, that everything is God, all Sarvam, all is Brahma. Like if you try to remember all the time that everything is Nitya, intellectual understand, intellectual remember. If we talk with someone, they remember that all of us here is one, is God. This helps us that while we take our actions in the world to keep us more in this stage of understanding.
So, Jay, I'm not sure I got the question. However, I did notice that we use some words like Brahman. See, even as a teacher, I'll say right now, I've never heard of the word Brahman before until we hear the word Brahman in this book, okay? So that's where we can all go along with the program. Now, the second thing that I heard was, I think it's got to do with intellectual understanding versus assimilation of the knowledge. Is this sort of true? Right, intellectual. It's like in the head.
Yes.
You mean like in the head? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So see, this is at the beginning. It will be in the head, because see, all knowledge, when you hear it, right, it always begins to be sort of this. I heard it. So now, as we go through slowly the program, right, then we relate it to ourselves. We need to relate it to our direct experience. Okay. So this, I can only say, is why we're going through the book. To get out of this quote, I heard it. I know I heard what these words are, but I don't kind of, it's not integrated. I'm not embodying this knowledge. Okay. I'm not embodying it. So give it some time and trust the program that we're going through, and it will become more and more clear. For now, I cannot sort of answer that because, you know, we're just introducing these words. Okay.
I think until you said it right, until you have an aparoksha anubhuti moment, it cannot be an emphatic yes to your question.
Yeah. Now when Bao says aparoksha, let's see, it just means direct. For example, right now, Jay knows how to drive a car, right? But she doesn't think about it, but it's there. It's assimilated, right? You can just, in emergency, get in the car and just drive. You don't think about anything. You don't think about where to put your foot. It's just automatic. So that comes through what? That comes through assimilated driving. That comes through assimilated practice. So therefore, in that similar way, as we drive this text, okay, then eventually we just, you know, understand that it becomes more relatable, more personal.
Could we compare this intellectual assimilation to acquiring bicycle balancing and swimming?
Yeah, you know, like, I mean, with anything, you know, it's you read a book on swimming, go, okay, so breaststroke, you know, take a deep breath and practice. But it's a whole different thing to actually start jumping into the text, into the pool of knowledge, and then start to explore. And this is what we're doing now. Okay. Okay. Shamadhi Shatka Sampatihi. Shamadhi is so 6, so this Adi, Shamadhi, so this is etc. So Shama, so 6-fold virtues starting with Shama and then etc. So it's not going to say what they are now, but Adi is etc. So see now, what are these 6-fold virtues? Okay, so before we mention them, you know, in chapter 12, the Bhagavad Gita, verse 4, what Krishna says to Arjuna is, for understanding, for direct understanding of this knowledge, where it's embodied, where it's integrated, the adhikari, right, the deserving recipient needs some maturity. They need to have their mind together. Their mind needs to be together. What does this mean? It means their mind is not scattered. Okay, it means their mind has a decent organizational capability. It's decently organized. It doesn't just sort of throw all sorts of words and then, you know, it's able to take one concept and then ask about that concept and then understand that concept and then ask about another concept. And then one by one, it kind of assimilates it one by one. And it is, you know, it enjoys a level of maturity, emotional maturity. So in other words, it doesn't go for a ride, you know, when the senses, because your senses are always open, your eyes are open, your ears are open. Okay. So when the senses come in touch with the world, then the person just doesn't go for, you know, a ride and just sort of lose themselves in this experience. And they're also, you know, Krishna also, what it means in this verse 4 is one has redefined their purpose of life. Okay. So this is what we call emotional maturity. You know, so what is emotional maturity? Is this a product of sort of, you know, pretending to be emotionally mature? No, it is again, it's like, you know, what is the real purpose of life? Why am I really here? You know, what is the highest purpose of living? So by asking these questions, which is again, Viveka, by the way, asking these questions, what happens? Automatically, you start to kind of put things in the right place, right? You start to, you know, understand what is for me and what is not for me. So the person gets a little bit more selective. They get selective with their friends. They get selective with the things they watch, the things they hear, which is not, you know, it's not sort of like you're trying to, you know, be selective. It's just that, you know, what is for you. You know what helps you, okay, and what will sort of not help you so much. What will give you a little bit of kind of some trails of discomfort, which is okay. So even if discomfort comes, see again, this is as we will soon see, it means that the mind got triggered. So even if discomfort comes for some reason, then even that is an opportunity to emotionally mature. So this means there is some work there to do. Because if the fella walks through the world and they're subject to being triggered by various kind of, people and programs and words and things, right? It's just never ending. It's never ending, right? By clients, and then you give your best work to your client and then they kind of don't show gratitude. And you're giving all you got, right? And then, oh my God, where's the gratitude? Can someone just acknowledge a little bit of my time, a little bit of what I'm giving here? So this can throw us off a little bit if we don't have that inner resilience, if we don't have that inner strength, that inner, if we don't know our value in the world, and then one can fall prey to other people's stuff. Right? They say, no, you don't get it. You'll never get it. And you're like, oh, you're true. And then we go into our own physiological, psychological problems going, that's right. They're confirming my inner narrative. So now it becomes my problem. We call this internalizing, right? Internalizing. And this is where most problems come, right? So someone says something, it is their stuff. And the more after we hear it, we start to ponder that more and more and more. And then we start to build onto that, what does this mean? And then we start to look for proof in our own life how what they said is actually true. And then we use our memory to draw references of circumstances that confirm their words. So now what's this? This is called internalizing, making it a lot worse than it actually is. Okay. And then after a whole day is gone, we feel terrible. Like one feels just terrible because their mind has just created like dozens of situations to sort of add onto it and subtract the good parts, add, the bad parts. And it's like, oh God, I feel terrible. So we feel exhausted, fatigued, because we allowed something so simple to affect us so much. So now when it says this, when Krishna says, this emotional maturity, it means not getting carried away by this experience, not allowing your mind to get carried away by non-stop incomings that are kind of being received by the world. Okay. So therefore, again, this maturity means the purpose, right? You know what your purpose is, and you're clear on that purpose. Okay. And through that purpose, which is evolve, right? To evolve as a human being, through that evolution, we protect our minds. We protect our minds from this sort of internalizing things and then feeling disempowered by it. And all of these things are required. So there's a level of responsibility that everyone has, and that is to protect their mind from things that can sort of add discomfort and add unnecessary drama, which is sometimes it's unavoidable, right? I get it. At work, it's literally unavoidable. So it's very easy to say this now here when everything's quiet, but at work and in real life, it's very hard. But still, it doesn't mean that it's over. You can still have the right attitude, and what attitude is this? In chapter 3 of the Bhagavad Gita, we call that karma yoga. So what is karma yoga? For example, karma yoga has two parts. The first part is the right attitude. So this means that you understand that even though no action, as we discussed just now, no action can knock off ignorance, can reveal nityam. No action can reveal nityam. So no action can therefore knock off this ignorance. But what can action do? What can action do?
Improve your mind by performing sadhana that can give you clarity to be able to understand
Yeah, lovely, lovely. So action, all we really have in this world is action. I mean, we're born and we have hands, we have feet, so we're never not acting, right? This is you can't just wake up and do nothing. Impossible. So every action allows us an opportunity to know that I am, not giving just to my partner or to the student or to the teacher or to your son or your daughter, but you're giving to the much grander order, your much vaster order you're giving to. And therefore, your actions become an expression of this devotion. They become an expression of devotion to this order, which we will speak about, the Ishvara order, to the Lord. And therefore, your actions take a different tone. Before, it was just about from me to you. Now it is from me to the whole, to the total. And therefore, actions now take a tone of devotional attitude. And now the second part of karma yoga is what we call the prasada buddhi, prasada. So prasada just means it is, you understand that see, when you give actions into the world, even though if you give with the right attitude, even if we do give with the right attitude, then the expectations may not be in keeping, the results may not be in keeping with our expectations. Okay, so this means that, even if you do give your best, the expectations that you receive back, they're not always in keeping with what we want, right? Because the results are sometimes different. They're totally different than we expected. So therefore, and then you understand it's okay, because this intelligent order, it's intelligence, which we will speak about. What is this intelligence? It has to be coming from a vaster order. Therefore, there's this trust involved. It is not just a random thing that I'm getting. There is an order. Right now, the time is not right to receive it, but it may come in the future, or it may not. It may even come in the next life. So there's a certain trust that when you give your actions into the field, even if you don't receive what you expected, there is still a trust. It is coming from an intelligence. It is a righteous result, believe it or not. Even if it seems unfair, it is a justified result. Even though we may not understand how it's justified, it is still justified one way or the other. Okay. Maybe later on, in 1 year from now, you'll see, what I received was actually the best thing ever. You may even realize that 10 years from now. So there is some patience involved there. Okay, so this is this emotional maturity that Krishna speaks of in Bhagavad Gita. Okay. So sixfold virtues. Mind is focused. Why is the mind focused? If it's not focused, then it wanders off. Your body may be here, but where's the mind? Not here. So this is a lack of focus. Okay, so we are synchronizing. This is why I say the mind is together. Where the body is, that's where the mind is. That's called an organized, concentrated mind. Where the body is, that is where the mind is. It's paying attention to what is going on now. Okay. Why is this important? Because in the world, we are trained how? We are trained to either think of the past in order to draw from that, and this, kind of give to save us time. This is why memory is also important. It saves you time. You learn from the past mistakes, but the thing is, we end up kind of drawing from the past all the time. And then it seems like it's a shortcut, but it prevents learning. What's the most common example of this? When, for example, if I give homework, then to explain words like nityam, what would a fella do? They will draw from the words they already heard before, from many, many other teachers. They'll bring in words like Brahman, consciousness. We haven't even talked about these words. So what does this mean? It's much easier to take something which I think I've assimilated and just sort of dump it in the present and think, I'm good now, I've explained. But what are you actually doing when you do that? What are you actually doing when you take a word, right, that you think you've understood? Even if you did have understood, it doesn't matter. Suppose you take a word and put it into the present. It means in that moment, I have denied myself of looking further into this word that I just dumped in the present. I have denied myself, and I've told myself that I've actually understood the totality of this word that we just used. Okay, that is the danger of using these words like Brahman and so on, and thinking, let me communicate with you because we kind of went through the Gita program, we went through with other teachers, so we can use these words. If there's one attitude that I've been following personally in my life, it is a beginner's mindset. Every time any class I go to, I pretend like I've never heard of anything. I ask basic questions like what is this? Like, what is consciousness? What is this? I've never heard. Tell me about Ishvara. And people think like this guy doesn't know anything. And I'm like, I'm learning, so much more to learn, right? Now, on the outside, it seems like, it's like, you're kind of sacrificing your reputation. But actually, it keeps what we call a beginner's mind, a child's mindset. The reason why children learn so fast is because they have this attitude. They don't depend on the past, right? They go, okay, feed me this knowledge. Okay, I'm hearing this for the first time. And then tell me, what is this? Tell me, what is this? How does this work? Tell me more about this. Okay, so this is this beginner's mindset, not allowing to draw words from the past and then just seems like an easy way to go, but you're actually denying yourself what? You're denying yourself the opportunity to look at it from a different angle, to understand it deeper, which would actually help you a lot. Okay, or the second way is what? Worrying about the future. So in other words, what is anxiety? What is anxiety? When we feel anxiety, what is the mind doing when we feel anxiety? Future, that way. In other words, it imagines something that I would not want to happen. And then what happens? By the power of our imagination, what do? We start adding what if then, if this happened, then I will do this. And all of these if thens, they are probably like, they're just circumstances that are distance from real life. They're not true. They've probably never happened before, right? They will likely not happen, but the mind continues. If they say this, then I'll respond like this. But if they respond like this to how I responded, then I will respond like that. Right. So in other words, it takes like all of these if then, you become like a computer program, like a little program, if then, and you write a little code in your mind. And then 1,000 scenarios, and this is called anxiety mode, right? If then. So now, what is this sixfold virtue? You catch yourself and say, no, this may be a habit, but a habit doesn't make it right. Okay, I have the right to stop this. I have the right to interrupt this. So now this I have the right is another virtue, which is, coming into your power and saying, I do have my own volition. I can stop out of my own willpower and change this if then scenario generation code creation mode. Okay, so we can say no to our minds. Our minds is like a pet. You get a little dog and your dog doesn't follow you, doesn't listen, pools everywhere. So, right? And then you have to what? Tell it what? Once? Don't poo over here. What happens? Nah, you got to have patience, maybe 100 times. And little by little, okay, less and less poo in the house, more and more outside. So therefore, less poo in the mind, more it's left outside. How so? Like a pet. We need to keep on telling our mind, stop. You've been doing this before. You're used to it. I get it, but stop. Let's look for something different. Let's look for a different approach. Therefore, you're having a nice little friendly conversation with this process of if then. It's called anxiety thinking, right? Future thinking. And you just stop and you look around perhaps and you say, okay, what is to be done right now? What could be done right now? What is the highest value activity that I could actually do right now, rather than sort of, contemplating on this if and then. Okay. So this is hard. I get it. I think we all know this if and then very well. I know it too personally. However, it is very possible to interrupt this. And the good news is once you do it, when you do it once, it becomes much easier the second time. Okay. So this is these 6-fold virtues of emotional maturity, of looking over your psychological processes and not letting them go for a wild run, okay? Being the manager of the mind, being the manager of your mind, stepping in and saying, let's be a manager of the mind. Okay, so now the next word is mumukshutvam. Mumukshutvam, okay. Anything you want to say?
Your mind map has made it very, very wonderfully clear and clarified. It's like going through the whole book.
Oh, the one.
Mind map, yes, yeah,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
great.
Oh,
Yeah.
they're lovely. They're like visual
Yes.
and colorful.
Yeah. It's like a huge algorithm, visual algorithm.
Yeah,
Right.
it helps a lot. It helps a lot if you do mind
Yeah.
mapping.
Yeah.
So every program that I listen to, or every book, I actually mind map it myself, and it just it significantly increases your sticking power. A sticking power, that means the knowledge stays with, and the longer it stays with, the more one's able to think about it unconsciously and in the background. So there is a level of memory involved, and so people have different methods. My method has always been mind map. There's a little program software. It starts with a thread, and then I just drag out the thread like a tree, and then write the text on that tree. And then you can create like branches, right? And then those branches represent key topics. And now just doing this, right? Your brain's thinking, okay, how is this connected to this? And how is this connected to that? So it's almost a self-inquiry of its own. And I highly, highly recommend this process called mind mapping. Yeah, but people have different ways. Okay, mumukshutvam cheti. So mumukshutvam cha iti. So now we said mumukshu is one who is desirous of liberation. So what does this mean? It means their desire to be free is dominant. In reference to activities in the world, right? You can see. One doesn't have to be, we think often I have to sort of be single, or, marriage is an interruption to my spiritual progress, or partnership. These are all ideas that have nothing to do with mumukshu. A mumukshu, in fact, in the Vedic times, marriage was a normal thing, right? The rishis, they were all married people. So, when we say mumukshu, first and foremost, it's got nothing to do with what lifestyle you live. That is your choice. As long as the lifestyle allows some decent time for inquiry, some decent time for working on managing your mind, reflecting on these teachings, that lifestyle is good enough. Otherwise, there's no definitive lifestyle for a mumukshu, right? There's no definitive place. The mumukshu isn't someone who lives in the forest, or they sort of live alone, or they live together, or they're in some spiritual community. These are, again, all unnecessary ideas that we create, and we just add unnecessary complications. A mumukshu is just someone who has a desire to be free. They want to know, they want to be free, right? This desire is above all else. And it doesn't at the same time neglect those who they love, right? It doesn't neglect their family. It doesn't neglect their work. It doesn't neglect their children. It doesn't neglect their business. It very much is still all inclusive, but above all, the mumukshu wants freedom above all. They understand that my real purpose, my true purpose, according to the scriptures here is moksha, is liberation. So therefore, this much is clear. Now what is a mumukshu? Mumukshu is one who understands what is required for moksha. They know that much. They know that in these Shaktipaths and these yoga versions, different forms of yoga, they are there. They're there to help your mind. They're there to purify the mind. But they don't get caught up in this. They don't turn this into the ultimate end of life. They don't turn asanas. Today in the Western world, at least, you say the word yoga. What is yoga attached to? Out of the 8 steps of yoga, right? Yama, niyama, right? What do they take? They take just asanas. They don't even take pranayama, right? Or dhyana. It's just asanas. It's just postures. So, and now postures becomes a sort of a main thing of life. Which is okay also because, young people, they need to channel their energy. So it's better to do some asanas than to go shooting monsters on the computer, which itself also can be, better than going out and smoking weed with others. So again, there's no right or wrong, but it's a matter of focus. It's a matter of knowing what is your value. And that value has precedence to everything else that comes in life. Okay. Now, this mumukshu, philosopher, who is a philosopher? Let's take a mumukshu compared to a philosopher. Are they the same? Mumukshu and a philosopher. No. However, philosophy, being a philosopher, does have some value. Now, what value is that? Being a philosopher, it gives you intellectual discipline. Okay, just to think, it gives you intellectual discipline. You learn the power of thought. You learn to stick with one thought, and therefore to get the meaning, to get the conclusion out of it, and then move on to the next thought. So this means even someone who came from a philosophy, right, a philosophy background, this can be hugely beneficial because they know to stick around until they think. So it has a intellectual value. And one more thing I want to say about this viraga. See, even after, even when a common myth, right, is that people ask, so for a wise person, right, a liberated person, a jnani, why do they still continue doing anitya, right? Why do they still do meditation? Why do they still do like these funny things that are just not required anymore? This is a very common question. And the answer is because, see, anything has a habitual value, right? Suppose like, you do meditation. That meditation for you has a habitual value. If you don't do meditation, suppose, right, what's going to happen? The mind's going to get a little bit, out of whack. So it has a habitual value. There's a phrase that somewhere, it comes from somewhere, maybe Zen Buddhism. It says, before liberation, chopping wood, after liberation, chopping wood. So this is a wonderful portrayal, right? The fella still continues chopping wood, even though they're just chopping wood. It's nothing special, but they still chop wood. Why? Because it's got habitual value. It keeps their mind healthy, keeps their mind sane. So this means another myth to drop is we often think, a liberated fella changes their behavior, right? They they stop doing the business, they stop kind of feeding the kids, they stop doing work. No, this is again incorrect because all of these things have a habitual value for this fella. They keep them decently sane. They keep them healthy. They keep them a sense of well-being. So again, we cannot sort of now give different, because Nenu asked, she asked, what is this wise person like? So again, just by understanding this, before chopping wood, after chopping wood. So we cannot now go, kind of judging based on what a person does. Oh, you're meditating, you're still kind of looking for these experiences. No, we don't know why the person's meditating. We don't know. So therefore, there's no reason to judge based on what activity the person does. It doesn't say much. It's got a habitual value. Okay. All right. So now the way the book works is it's going to ask, what is Nitya, Anitya? What is Viraga? What is the sixfold virtues? What is Mumukshu? Okay. So let's see what it says in the next page. All right. So page 14. I'll chant first and then you can follow. Nitya anitya vastu viveka kaha. Nitya vastvekam brahma. Tadvyatiriktam. Sarvam anityam. Ayam eva. Nitya anitya vastu viveka kaha vivekaha. Okay. So what is kaha? So what is this viveka? Okay, what is this this process of discriminative inquiry regarding nitya and anitya? So when it says viveka, this word viveka, it is regarding what? It is regarding, see, in the Shastra, there are four goals. Okay, there are many goals, but for general purposes, there are just four. And they say there's, pursuit of delights. We said pursuit of delights is necessary. If there's no delight pursuit, we will go crazy. There is pursuit of security. If we have no security, then we will constantly worry about survival, and that's not going to help us at all. There is pursuit of ethics. If we don't pursue ethics, then we will be, just loaded with guilt and, sense of wrongdoing. So these goals are very important. They're all required. But then there's also moksha. So now when it says viveka, it just means that this fella has these four goals in check. Okay, they understand that these four goals, what they are, and the ultimate goal is actually moksha. The former three, right, the pursuit of delights, the security, and ethics, they're there just to subserve moksha. They're there to keep the mind in check. They're there to keep a sense of well-being so that the person can actually understand this knowledge, and therefore they can liberate. They can liberate from the cycle of rebirth. Okay. Now, what does it say here? Nitya vastvekam. So nitya vastu ekam brahma. So nitya. So this reality that we are speaking of, the eternal reality, it is one, only one. So this nitya vastu, so one permanent, right, ekam, one permanent reality, vastu, one permanent reality called Brahma. You heard the word Brahman, so why is there no N here? This is because Brahman is a stem. If you decline Brahman into a nominative singular, then you have Brahma. Okay, in Brahman is Brahmani. From Brahman is Brahmana. I think it's Brahmanaha. I'm not sure, but I think it's Brahmanaha. Yeah, and of Brahman is Brahmanaha. So, so now what is this? What is this nityam? It says it is one reality called Brahma. Now, Brahman comes from the root BRH, okay? Bravo, Romeo, hotel, BRH, brh. Brh means to grow or to expand. Now, is this one reality something that grows or expands? Is it in the active process of growing or expanding? No, it is already grown maximum. It is already at its maximum. Is it expanding more and more? No, it is already maximum expanded. That means it will never be smaller or bigger than it already is. Now, when it says Brahma, another important point is this is not when we say, see, Brahma means big. In summary, just means big. Now, when we say big, we don't mean a big that is qualified by an object. For example, Eiffel Tower big. Okay, so how big is Eiffel Tower big? It's as big as the Eiffel Tower. How big is a pencil big? It's as big as a pencil. How big is atom big? It's as big as an atom. So this is not what we mean by big. It just means that nothing is bigger than it. It is the biggest of the biggest, and it's the smallest of the smallest. That means there's nothing smaller than Brahman, and there's nothing bigger than Brahman. That means nothing is outside Brahman. Nothing is outside this reality, this eternal reality called Brahman. Because if it was outside, then what are we now talking? We're now talking, problem of time and space. So what? There's space between Brahman and there's space between another reality. So now who created that space in between? You got Brahman 1 and Brahman 2. So now what is the space in between? Who created the space, right? And now you got to go, okay, who's that creator? So you go into this whole problem of time and space issues. So now, just to give you a metaphor, this Brahman is the biggest of the biggest and the smallest of the smallest. That means nothing can ever go outside it. While at the same time, Brahman is the content of everything. So just to give you a little metaphor, suppose you have the wave, right, and the ocean and the water, right? Just a common example. Now what? How big is the ocean? How big is it's very big, right? And how big is the wave? Well, the wave is big as the wave, but does water have a size? Think about this. Does water have a size? No. Because water itself doesn't have a size, it is capable of what? Manifesting as the entire ocean, very big. It's also capable of manifesting as what? A small wave. So therefore, because water doesn't have a size is possible. Because water doesn't have high or low, for that reason, high tide and low tide is possible. Does water have a high tide? What has a high tide? The wave has a high tide. Okay, so in reference to the wave, it has a high tide. If water have a high tide, if water had a high tide, that means you could not have a low tide, because all waves would be stuck with high tide. You understand? So because water is free of height, is free of size, is free of high, is free of low, is free of big, is free of small, for that reason, you can have big, small, high, low, this, that, up, down. You understand this? Okay. So in other words, water is free of what? Of the attributes that it appears as. Okay, so water appears as what? As a high wave. Therefore, water is free of the highness. It's free of the waveness. Water appears as the ocean. Therefore, it is free of the oceanness. It is free of all of the waves within the ocean. Okay, for that reason, like Brahman is that which obtains as everything, but at the same time, Brahman is free of everything, because everything can be only because of Brahman, while Brahman is free of the forms, that are manifesting as this universe. Okay, make sense? Okay, so we just use a little metaphor just to introduce. Now, don't say, oh, okay, so, Brahman is water. Very interesting, by the way. It's not going to happen in this class, but 95% of the time, I tell you, whenever someone throws an objection against Advaita Vedanta, you know what they do? They take these examples literally. Okay, I just had a fella yesterday leave a comment on the website, and I said he's from Dvaita, right? From a dualist. It's always the same. He says, Advaita has a problem with all these metaphors, wave and water, gold and ornament, right? Wood and chair. It's all flawed. And then he says, because atoms are actually smaller than water and wave, than wood, than gold. And I'm like, how did you even create that connection? Like, it's not talking about atoms. It's meant to convey the reality as a metaphor. So in other words, they took those examples and they applied what? A literal meaning rather than an implied meaning. They didn't take into account it's meant to convey an understanding. Rather, they took it as, I'm talking about water. I'm talking about the wave. And then go and they analyze the water. Oh, but water is made up of molecules. So the whole consciousness is wrong because water is molecules. And I'm like, oh my God, how did you make this connection? You have to be creative to do this. And so, how do you answer this fellow now? Because he started out with the wrong assumption. So now you have to slowly weave the thread and little by little, kind of get him and save them from this mistake. Now, the irony is, fellas like this, they're so convinced by their existing notion that even if you tell them to understand what these metaphors really mean, you have to come to class. If you tell them that, because they're already so convinced by their notion, they're not going to come to class. Therefore, what happens? Lack of faith, lack of trust, and therefore the person misses the opportunity, even though it's been staring right at them all along. So therefore, the person has to go through another lifetime just to knock off this sort of, this sort of pride, like I figured it out and I can knock off any kind of logic. And this is constantly I see this. Bao?
Yeah, as Shankara said, Shabda Jalam Maharanyam Chitta Brahmanakaranam. Right?
Yeah, translate, please. Translate.
Too much of philosophy, too much of philosophizing leads one to lunacy.
Oh, yeah. And that's one more point. He used some big words. I had to look them up in the dictionary. And these are words like, a philosopher understands. I don't even know these words. Like phenology or something. It's a doctrine. It's a school of doctrine or something. So it's always the same story. Whenever an objection comes, it's probably the person's looking at the literal meaning rather than the implied meaning, and therefore the whole argument starts from there on. So, what do? You offer a little bit of advice. Don't give too much. Otherwise, they'll use what you told them against you, and they will then perpetrate that and further start to destroy this Vedanta. So the person has a responsibility to treat it in a proper method. Lorena.
Like you said before, having a closed mind, like having a preconditioned ideas and then bringing that into the class rather than having an open mind, which allows you to learn.
Yeah, exactly.
Having that, yeah.
Very much. And I tell you, an open mind, I honor an open mind more than all of the philosophy in the world. I mean, so what? So what? The person dies tomorrow. They forget about everything. What now? What now? Right. So this open mind is a true quality of a fella, a wise fella who deserves all of the credit. And very rare to find nowadays, but when we do, it's something to cherish. Robert?
Yeah, I want to conduct a bit of a defense of philosophers here, because a true philosopher examines systems of thought. They don't even value their own opinions, because you maintain an objective stance, and you challenge that thought on its own basis.
Okay.
So if you're really doing philosophy, you're not holding personal opinions, you're looking at rational ways of understanding thought systems.
Okay, so a true philosopher will look at it objectively and examine it rather than kind of inserting their own spin and then maybe walking away. Bao?
Yeah, like my mother used to say in Vedanta, as you mentioned, as Lorena mentioned, the Sanskrit phrase adhigasya adhigam phalam holds water. Is it right?
Yeah, it's good.
The more, the better.
Yeah, the more
At
the
least
better.
in the-
Okay, so just want to show we're on the right time. Okay. Yeah, so it's an ongoing issue that we have to deal with, and it doesn't stop. It's actually one of the things that does annoy me, but you know, again, we all have, you know, our own stuff to kind of opportunities to not internalize it, right? Because you know, all of these like wonderful scriptures, they're there, the logic is there, the non-contradictory nature of this teaching is there, and then you got one more person with the same issue that the fella, you know, from last week came. So it's always the same pattern. And so the person has to sort of, you know, kind of protect their minds not to get swooned by this irrationality that is out there. Yeah. So this one reality is called Brahman. This one eternal reality is called Brahman. And tad vyatiriktam, everything other than that is sarvam anityam. Everything else is anitya. So everything else other than Brahman, which is the nature of nityam, eternal, always present, always true, never wavers, is never covered, is always available, even after death. Everything other than that is anityam, is time bound, is within the bounds of time. That means it begins, it sustains, and it ends, or it changes quality, or it changes quantity, or it changes texture, changes tone, changes it has a changing nature. This is anityam. It has a changing nature to it. What else is anityam? Right, this was homework. Write 20 things that are anityam. What else is anityam? You know, devatas, right? Gods, goddesses, angels, you know, mosquitoes, you know, thoughts, okay, memories, epiphanies, insights, revelations, understandings. See, even Vedanta is what? Anityam. These are just words. These are just words we're using. English language. Sanskrit is anityam. Okay? Because look, when we stop speaking, done. Okay? It's gone. The words are gone. The class is gone. So even these classes are anityam. Okay? Even this teacher is anityam. The student is anityam. Okay? So anything observed, everything observed that begins and ends, this is all anityam. Okay? Any experience is a nityam. What kind of experience? No, but you don't understand. My experience is nityam. I don't care. I don't know what experiences you're talking about. My experience is nityam. How do you know what experience I had? Hey, I tell you, my experience is nityam. Hey, the truth is anything that was not there before and suddenly is a nityam. This cannot be contradicted, as we will soon see. Okay, only that which is ever true is known to everyone, will always be known to everyone. Even 10,000 years from now, it will equally be known to that one as it is to this one, as it was in the Roman Empire times. It is equally known. It has never changed. It has always been ever fresh. It has always been free. That is to be discovered. That is nityam, the one reality, ekam, called Brahman. Okay, everything else other than that is rubbish or anityam. Okay, all right. Ayam eva. So, and this is ayam eva. This alone, this indeed, ayam is this, eva. This indeed is nitya, anitya, vastu vivekaha. This understanding, this basic understanding is indeed this process of discernment of nitya and anitya. Okay, and vastu just means reality. And vastu can also mean a thing, like an object when it's connected to the word anitya. So when you have anitya vastu, obviously it is right anitya objects. if you have nitya vastu, then is nitya an object? Why not? I want to hear this. Why is nitya not an object?
It's the truth of all objects.
Okay. And if nitya was an object, please argue this. Nitya is an object. Please argue this. Starting with no, it's not, because.
Well, objects have changes in space and time.
Good. Okay, that's the love. Anything else you want to say? Nitya
Like
is
water takes the shape of the container.
okay. Go on, and Nenu. Anything?
That- in that-
Eternity,
Nenu?
eternity cannot be an object.
Eternity cannot be an object.
Eternity cannot be an object.
Good. If it is an object, then where is that object of eternity? If it is an object, where is that object? It's in the mind. It's in the imagination. Imagination is another object because the imagination was not there before, and now it is, and then it ends. Therefore, to imagine eternity, imagination happens in the mind. Therefore, anything within the scope of thought, scope of sensation is anitya, including thinking that one is enlightened or not enlightened, or ignorant or knowledgeable or eternal or non-eternal. Where are all of these thoughts happening right now? They're happening in your mind. So if you say, I am eternal, even that thought itself is non-eternal because it just ended, right? So any thought, no matter what the content is of that thought, is anitya. Okay, so we're not talking about thoughts. We're not talking about wonderful feelings. We're not talking about incredible experiences, because they're all obtaining within the scope of your body, within the scope of your instrument, whose job is to experience, whose job is to give you sensations, whose job is to produce imaginations and analysis, and to give insights and to give wonderful revelations and so on. Okay, but we just don't mistake this instrument for nityam. So nityam is to be discovered other than this instrument. Okay, as we will see soon. Okay, anything you want to say? Anything on your mind? Okay. So this indeed is viveka, nitya, anitya. Okay. Dispassion, and then we will stop. Okay, next page. Viraga kaha iha swarga bhogeshu icharahityam. Okay, so dispassion, as we said, is itcha. So itcha is desire. The way to remember this, when you have an itch, you have a desire to scratch. So itcha, and rahityam is absence of desire, as we said, for bhoga, for experiences in reference to enjoyments here and swarga and in heaven. Okay, so iha here in this world and swarga there, thereafter, after death, like whatever world, brahmaloka, swarga, pitraloka, whatever you want to say. So absence of enjoyment, absence of longing for future enjoyments here or elsewhere. Okay, so this is dispassion, a maturity, a viveka that's involved here, that no matter what I gain in the future is subject to starting, therefore it is anitya. And owing to that understanding, the person doesn't look for that anymore. They want to now discover nityam. They want to find out what is nityam. Okay, so there's not much to say about that. Now let's see what else we have. Okay, and we will continue with the sixfold virtues. We will continue next week. Okay, starting with Shama, Dhamma, Uparama, Shraddha, samadhanam. Okay, so shama, dhamma, uparama, titiksha, shraddha, faith, and samadhanam. So we will see what are these sixfold virtues that an adhikari has more or less that qualifies them to perform tattva viveka, thereby understanding and quote gaining this nityam, gaining this eternity, or understanding oneself as this eternity. Okay, so 6. Any questions?
This Icha, can it be equated with Asha?
Asha?
Yeah, like Asha hi paramam dukkham.
I don't know this word, Asha.
Asha, craving, hope.
Asha, I mean, absence of craving, there's many words for desire.
The opposite of nirasha.
Yeah, so absence of craving, put it that way.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
All right, can I ask another question? Is that Ajay?
Ajay, yeah.
All right, in this pursuit of truth and understanding, is it required to have an experience of the truth before your knowledge sets in? Or is it just a psychological, is it just a thinking that you need to have? And when you talk about clarity, I think what I'm struggling to understand is, should that clarity proceed with an experience of the clarity before you get clarity?
No, see, you're always experiencing the truth, okay? The truth is never not experienced. So the truth doesn't have to, quote, be experienced to know the truth. Otherwise, if that was the case, you would not be pursuing the truth, because you quote, see, what compels you to pursue the truth? The truth. So that means you're already in touch with the truth. So no, you don't need to experience the truth, because the truth is never not experienced. Okay, the truth is nityam. It's never going to be sort of, you're not going to begin experiencing the truth in the future. Okay, so you're not going to begin experiencing this nityam, when you pull off some special yogic technique. This is yoga. It's got its place, but this is not going to happen. So the first step is to drop this desire or this expectation that I'm supposed to sort of experience this truth. So how do we start in Vedanta? We say very simple, Ajay. You're already experiencing the truth right this moment. This is why you're here, because you're already in touch with the truth. That means you want to gain clarity of what is this truth. Okay, so this is why we're here, to gain clarity of what is the truth. Okay, the truth is never covered. That's why you're seeking for the truth, because truth is not covered from your standpoint. Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.